everybody hear me?
Keeps you busy.
Welcome. We don't want to interrupt your lunch, but we do want to get started. We want to be mindful of time. My name is Amber Haynes, and I am one of the adjustment counselors at the high school. We are in the guidance department. This year, I work with grade 10 and 11.
And I'm Nicole Dressel, I'm the other adjustment counselor, and I primarily work with grades 9 and 12.
And so welcome today. We want to thank the Winchester Coalition for Safer Community for sponsoring this program. We are going to introduce our panelists for today. And we just want to also talk a little bit about the initiative for why we want to specifically offer this program that is about managing your young teenager that is about to transition beyond the walls of Winchester High School, really in the support of managing their mental health beyond their teen years. We started this program in partnership with various partners and programs back in 2019, when we really recognized that it's not just something that's happening with our teens, and we really wanted to support that. And then over the years, it's really developed. And this year in particular, post-pandemic and whatnot, we were looking for resources, seeing what was out there. We're doing our professional development for today. And there are so many resources out there for that transition from teenhood to young adulthood. And so we thought this program more than ever needs to continue to happen. So thank you for showing up today. Thank you for being a part of the program. There will be opportunities to ask questions to our panelists. And then just as the information has gone out, our two young adult speakers will also be talking to your teens over at the high school this afternoon in Winblock. So hopefully you'll continue the conversation at home. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the guidance department. Your guidance counselors are amazing. You can reach out to us, and we'll be able to support you and your teens in this transition. So we're going to start off with John Madelman. He's one of our speakers, a clinician here. Not here, but in the local area. And then we also have Molly Boynton, who is the Director of Student Support Services at Tufts University. We have Isabel Jenkins, who is going to share her story of resilience and attends Tufts University. And we have Dana Altman, who is also going to share her stories of resilience. So thank you guys for coming, and we're going to offer it back over to John.
So the microphone is not for you guys, it's for cable. I'm so happy to be here. I love to be in Winchester. Has anyone heard me speak before? Oh, a couple of you? Okay. You don't have, and you're staying? That's amazing. So I only have half an hour, which freaks me out because that's not enough time. Also, if there are any slides which are of interest to you, just take out your phone. And if you don't want to do that, just email me and I will send you the slides. I will do that, and I'll do that the very day you email me. So I'm so happy to be here. This is who I am, what I do. I think I've done the Secret Life of Teens and Tweens in town quite a bit, and I'll just quickly, people ask me what that's about. I said, oh, I tell bad stories about my own parenting, like when with my daughter, I was fighting with my daughter, and I said to her, do you want me to talk or just listen? And she looked at me and she said, are you fucking kidding me? Are you capable of listening? And my son, when he came home drunk, that was a lovely event. And you're so screwed when your dad's a therapist. You don't get punished. You get to go to an AA meeting. So, and here are some of the other things I do. But we're going to be talking about something different. Your child going off to college. And by the way, that is my son, his first day of preschool about 30 years ago or so. And this is a big deal. This is a big deal. I don't want to minimize it's a big deal. By the way, if I look at this piece of paper, it's just my cheat sheet of staying on time. And I will really try to stick to that. So, before we get to your child leaving, we have to put it in context and all the things that are happening in our world, And frankly, I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, you're political or not. This has been a pretty upsetting time. I think we can all agree with that, And we've seen a lot of diminished patience, a lot of diminished kindness, in addition to all the political things going on. And of course, what is happening in your world in particular. So your child is leaving, but are you taking a picture of me or that? No, I'm only kidding. What is going on with you is very important too. But I'm going to skip some things. But let's start talking about the young brain. Okay, we used to think young brains were really dumb, but they're really smart. They're really smart, but they have some liabilities. They're very wedded to instant gratification. They really are based on social reward. Their friends saying that's cool, that's interesting, that sort of thing. They don't have a lot of experience. And now they're going off to college. Oh my goodness, all alone. And you've probably had this thought like, my child is not ready for college. I used to think about my son, Jake. By the way, I tell stories about my kids. They all know about it. They could care less. I used to think about my son, Jake. He needed like 17 gap years to be ready for college because he probably did. But the young brain is developing about to the age of 25. So what we try to do is try to accelerate that or wish that their brain is going to be developing quicker. And I always say to parents, don't ever change your expectations of your teen, their young brain, but you might have to change your timeline. It wasn't until junior year of college when my son got it together and became invested academically, socially, in every which way. And he was amazing in the last year and a half. Now, I wasted $150,000 before that. Might have been nice had he saved me that, but let's remember, don't change your expectations, but they're on their own timeline, and that's really an important thing to know about. So just really quickly, this is from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey looking at 2011 to 2021. I realize you guys can't see up there. Maybe I'll tip this here. To see about alcohol use has declined. That's a good thing. Marijuana use has declined. But look at the bottom categories and all the things that have increased, all the mental health categories. And by the way, if you're a senior in high school, you carry these with you to college. It's not like they disappear. So let me just see where we are time-wise here. Okay, we're good. This is a really interesting statistic. So notice the one that I made at the very top. Decreased time that you spent with their friends, 70%. We know why. They're more online. All of a sudden, they're going to be thrust into a college environment that has a high premium on being social. And they're not as practiced as a former generation, so this is really hard. And the easy thing to do is to go back to their computer. You can see that. But this is not something that's really going to help them, and we're going to talk about this morning, and we'll kind of go over these things as we go along. Just really quickly, I don't know if you can see in the back, it says 73% of college students say that school is overwhelming. It is. A lot of kids, if your child's going to college, they maybe have their own room, and now they have a roommate, and it's like they don't have privacy, they don't have their regular space, and now they have academic challenges, social challenges, athletic challenges. This is really hard. And down here, it says that close to 30% of college students fail a class because of mental health. And I know as parents, I've been through this, so I know your position. We think about academics and them doing well, but if their mental health is not in a good place, their academics will not follow at all. So I think it's really important. And one thing I've learned about COVID, for all the parts of COVID were overwhelming for all of us, is that COVID really shined a light on mental health and the importance of mental health. And everyone in here, raise your hand if you've done this. For the college your kids are going to, have you contacted or gone on the website to see about the mental health services in that college? This is really great to do. I did that. I called the mental health services and I said, well, what happens if, my son or daughter goes to, what do we do? And some colleges do triage. They might see for, 5 sessions. They have other people. It's really important in advance to do it. Now, you might be thinking, all right, my kid's like in a good place. I don't need that. It's going to be good to have that information before you need to do that for sure. How many of you guys know about something called the college tuition insurance? Does anybody know about that? Okay. Don't worry if you don't know about it. That's why you guys are here. So my kids, when they went to school, I really decided I was going to get this. And this meant if they had a dropout because of a diagnosed mental health disorder, I would get my money back from that semester. You ought to go online if you're interested in that, if you're worried about your kids in any way, or you think look, you're spending a lot of money to send your kids to school. A couple $100 is probably a good investment of your time. But just go online and look for, college reimbursement. It's a really good thing to know. All right, a couple more stats here. You can see that 40% of students fail to seek help. Why? Well, there's shame, there's stigma. They don't think that help can help them. And a lot of kids have magical thinking. Like when I get out of Winchester High School and I go to college, I won't have anxiety anymore. It's a great thought. I love it, but it's not true. Anxiety tends to follow us. And we know that rates of depression and anxiety are higher for college kids than high school kids. Why? Because they're not getting help. If you're not getting help, it just tends to not only stay with you, but continue in a negative pattern. And you can see some of these statistics are a little misleading because they're done by different places. But you can see 75% of students who suffer from depression do not seek help. We just saw that. And you can see that suicide is the third leading cause of death among college students. I've seen it be the second, but obviously it's a significant thing. Let's talk a little bit about mental health. I bet a room like this size, someone has asked you, how you doing? And let's be honest, you weren't doing really well with your mental health. And you said, I'm fine. People don't fake their mental health challenges, but they fake being well. Really important when you call your kids at school and you listen to them. If they say, I'm not feeling well, first we want to respond appropriately. We don't want to say things, well-intentioned as it may be, like, don't worry, you'll feel better. That's really not being heard. The very first thing you say when your child talks to you about a mental health issue they call from college, you say, thank you so much for sharing that. Let's acknowledge it. And let's really listen. Do more listening than talking. All right, so again, your child's soon off to college. This is one of my favorite pictures that I took of my son. All right, it's all about perspective. So if you don't remember this, you fell asleep in high school or college, but we're going to go through this. All right, you guys can come around if you want to see it. Okay, so there are two faces in here. This is one I've genetically altered. I did the eye, and I did the eyebrow, and the mouth, okay? Raise your hand if you cannot see that, if you cannot see it. Some people have a hard time seeing it. So this is kind of an older lady. This is her mouth. That's her eye, and she's kind of looking this way. We'll come back to it. And then this is looks like a younger woman, and she's looking that way, and that is her eyelash, and that is her ear, and that's kind of her jawline. We'll go back to the beginning. So that's both. Raise your hand if you can see both. Wow, you guys in Winchester are so smart. I was in Everett. Nobody knew crap, I got to tell you. All right, so what's this all about? It's about perspective. When my kids went off to college, it was really a hard thing for us. But, another perspective is it's a different time and it's a new time. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So transitioning to college from a parent's perspective, you can see the first line. It's a big deal. It is a big deal whether it's your first or second or whatever it is. And you can see here it happens in stages. You have a lot of stages here. And, of course, you're probably wondering in the summer, like, okay, it's like the end of July. My child hasn't done this, hasn't done that. They haven't packed. They're not going to do it unless they're ready to do it, ready? And that's really important to know. And you might want to politely suggest, I would do it by text. They don't like face-to-face contact. Anytime you want to go to Target, I'm happy to go with you, that sort of thing. But remember, starting that process can be very anxiety-producing for a child and for an adult. And, navigating new territory for all of you guys, and new rules. I remember when my daughter was a freshman at Clark University, she calls me on the phone, and she says, I can't talk. I said, excuse me? She says, I can't talk. I said, why the hell did you call me? She says, I'm walking across campus, and I just need someone to be on the phone. I said, why don't you fake it like anyone else? You could just fake talking to someone, So it's really important to understand that things happen in stages, and it happens in stages from a parent's point of view also. And you can see toward the bottom it says support, support, support. And support obviously is important, but let's remember what is good support. And good support is listening. I think as parents, and I'm guilty of it too, we talk too much. Or how many of you are fixer parents? You like to fix things? Yeah, of course. It's there. It's changed now, and we really want to listen, and we always want to say thank you for sharing that. It's just a good thing to say, to acknowledge it. And, my daughter sometimes I'll say to my daughter sometimes, or now my wife, now it's just the two of us, do you want me to talk or just listen, And so it's great. And most times my wife will say, just listen. I get it, totally. It's hard living with a therapist. I totally get that. And, it's also important to think about some of the things you can control and you can't control. So I'm just seeing where we are time-wise here. Yeah, there's a lot we can't control. You can see on the bottom it says encourage them, but not too much. If you encourage your college student too much, Mom, I'm not like 12 years old. This isn't soccer, I'll do it when I'm ready to do it. So we want to encourage just a little bit, and we want to ask their permission. You always want to be respectful of that. And by the way, when they criticize you, because they are going to criticize you, a lot about parenting. We have to use our brain to say, shut up, shut up, shut up. say, okay, thank you, or I'm glad to hear it, or I'm glad, I'm sorry you feel that way, or whatever, that sort of thing. But let's talk about previewing and reviewing. Let's talk a little bit about this. So closure is a big thing. So my sister said to me, and I'm going to quote her verbatim. She's not religious. She said, it's God's way of making it easy to say goodbye to your child because their behavior the summer after they graduate from high school is so abominable, you're happy for them to leave. I see some people shaking their heads. It's really true. Yeah, my son did that. He went out the night before college, and I'm not even going to get into it because I know it's on cable. I don't want him to get arrested. But, so they're on their bad behavior. Like, I don't have any homework. Be off the computer. It can be a really hard summer. And that's part of the process. It's part of the process. And by the way, it will get worse when they come back at Thanksgiving. And guess what? Your rules, they don't matter too much. Their rules matter a lot and that sort of thing. So it's really important to talk about closure and to solicit from your kids, what do you want? Do you want a big party? No, Mom, I've told you 50 times. You go have a party, Mom, that sort of thing. However they want to do it, it's really important to talk about the logistics of going to school, money and finances and that sort of thing, and talk a lot about mental health. If you've experienced mental health challenges in your life, it's a really good time. You haven't shared it. It's a really good time to share it. It's a really good time. And I did that with my kids when they went to college. I talked about how I really struggled, particularly freshman year, and how I went to the counseling center. But in those days, the stigma was much more, and I shared with them quite a bit about that. And you can see in the bottom it says, when you arrive. And I probably should have said, when you arrive with permission. With permission, if your child will allow you to make their bed, it helps you out. Like, you're the parent, you've been doing this for a long time, right? But you have to ask permission. Make sure that they get on the tech, but with permission. You're asking permission now with your kids more than you have before. And I'm going to ask you guys, all right? You guys are smart. All right, what's like a bad thing to say to a college student when they're going off? Anybody? Like, what's a bad thing to say? Good luck. No, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Anybody have one? Anybody? I'll help you out. Here's a bad thing. Yes. Yeah, be instructive or saying like, if you have a hard time and if you flunk out, you can always come home. Now that it says to the child, you have no confidence in me, right? They said, I think that's a good point. I think everything you say to them is a good thing, Here's what you say to them. I love you. I have confidence in you. Sometimes you don't have confidence in yourself, but I love you. That's it. Something simple, nothing complicated. You spent 17, 18 years preparing your child to college, and sometimes you forget all the great things you have done. So you're finishing your mark as I love you, and, I have a lot of confidence in you, that sort of thing. So let's talk about expectations. So a lot of the parental expectations are around academics. Nothing wrong with that. But again, your expectation is that, in my mind, as I look back many years after, your kid to have a safe and good year. And we'll talk about safety in a moment. If they have a safe and good year, if they find a good group of friends, if they happen to fall in love once, twice, or three times, that happens, that makes for a good year, absolutely. And asking yourself, what would success look like? I know you have a notion like they, get all A's or whatever it is, but what success would look like is really important. And to think about your own anxiety and fears and not put them on your child. Raise your hand, and I'm raising my hand. If you've ever let your own anxieties filter down and put it on your child, yeah, my hand should be the highest raised. Yeah, absolutely. So we really don't want to put that anxiety on there, particularly when we're dropping them off. One of my suggestions is drop them off at school and leave as soon as you can. It's just better for everyone, even though it can be hard for everyone too. And also in the bottom, it says how this impacts other siblings. And this plays out in interesting ways, because another sibling will say, do I get the big room now? That sort of thing. Do not give away your child's room. Do not do anything. But it's really important. The other siblings at home are watching how you handle this process. So it's really important to think about that. And let's look at transitioning to college from a child's perspective. Hey, wait a second, John. That's the same damn slide I just showed for our parents. Yes, it is. It's the same slide for sure. Sorry, I'm just seeing where we're at here. It's the same slide. They're going through a lot. And a lot of kids are going to minimize it and say, oh, it's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And they're going to be trying things before they leave for college. Could be drinking, drugging, sexual things before, just to get themselves to prepare. And so they're going to this whole new arena where nobody knows them and they feel like they have to prove themselves. How many of you with your kids in college, the college offers a pre-college like Trek programs? Anybody have that? So if you don't know about this, a lot of colleges do that. You can go before the fact and do these adventure things. There are some great statistics around kids who participate in that in terms of graduation. Now, colleges, graduation is 5 years, right? That's what they have for the standard. It used to be 4 years, but colleges said, no, their kids are dropping out and they're coming back, so we're going to do 5. Our stats will look better. But our pre-college Trek program, if your child can do that, that significantly increases their ability on campus and their graduation rates. It's really amazing. Go online and look at this. And that's exactly what we did for my son. I said, you really have to be on a pre-college Trek program with the college. And so the first day of college, when we went to bring his stuff there, he had 30 best friends. You know, it was amazing. So if you're interested in that and if you can afford that, I highly, highly recommend that. Yes. It could be hiking. It could be camping. He went to some island in Boston Harbor and built something. They have all sorts of ones now, but it's affiliated with the college. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Not the same as orientation. Absolutely not. So this is where your kids will be, anywhere from thriving to in crisis. And by the way, this is over a 6-minute period. When they call you in crisis, here's what your job is: not to be in crisis. Now, I'm a crisis person, so as soon as I heard that from my kids, like I was in crisis, and I'll never forget a story. Now, this is on tape. I'm not going to say which of my children, but one of my kids was really in crisis and said, I'll call you after class. Never called. I was freaking out. Should we get in the car? They're only, going to Clark University. It's pretty close by. Finally got my child, and how you doing? Fine. What are you talking about? Like they completely forgot about it. Your job is not to freak out too much. And look at all the transitions, living away from home for the first time, loss of privacy, new friends, new freedom. Most kids who I speak to, have spoken to over the years, are excited about the freedom. Most kids I speak to are terrified about the freedom, organizing their time. And you probably look at your child and say, oh my goodness, my child. Raise your hand if you have a disorganized child. Okay, so you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, should I call them about homework every night? Try not to. Yeah, it's really hard, and it's part of the brain maturation. I mean, my son was very disorganized, and I realized he didn't have the maturity of the brain development. He did get it together by the time he was a junior, unfortunately, but that's what it is. And you can see practically everything is new. So I'm sorry to share this slide with you, because this slide has some not great statistics about percentage of kids who drop out. Loneliness being a factor. We know that accidents and suicide are 2 of the top 3 leading deaths for freshmen. Remember, they have a young brain, and you can see that most fatalities on a college campus happen freshman year. So these are things which are terrifying to us, and we want our kids to be good decision makers, and we only hope that their roommate is a good person and their friend group is a good person, and they're going to be making some good decisions. Okay, I'm way behind here, so I got to catch up. Here's what you need to do. This is something you need to encourage them. Join a club. Be part of something. If your kid's not good at sports, still join intramurals. There are plenty of kids who suck at intramurals. That's a friend group right there, Go see your professors. Ask for help. Attend activities. Don't stay in your room. I know it's easy to do that. Don't stay in your room, Meet as many people as possible. I think probably one of the worst things that would happen is if your child meets someone the first day and falls in love, and then they crowd out everyone else. Now, maybe that'll be their life partner, and that's great, but not for most people. But having as many friends as possible is really great. And we want kids to be self-generous. What is that all about? I haven't been like making friends, I can dump on myself, or I can be self-generous and say, that's okay, maybe I'll make another friend. Or I said something really stupid in class today, now everyone thinks I'm a moron. That's okay. If we can teach our kids to be self-generous, they're not going to be beating themselves up about what they've done or ruminating about the future. They're going to be in the moment. So self-generosity is a really important thing. And even though your kids don't know this, it's a marathon. It's a marathon, the year. It really is. By the way, your kids are going to be home so often you're wondering why you're paying $75,000 a year for that college, but that's a whole other presentation. Okay, so very quickly, some of the things you're dealing with: stress, anxiety, and trauma. Here's what stress is. These are very different terms, stress and anxiety. You're walking down the street in Winchester, and there's a tiger on the street. I don't know why it's there, but it is. That tiger could eat you, hurt you, kill you. That's just stressful. Now, let's just pretend that tiger's been captured and is in some zoo in California, but you're never walking down the same street in Winchester again. That's what anxiety is. When the stressor has been removed, but you're still stressed, that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is the #1 mental health disorder in this country. I would suspect a lot of your children have it. By the way, that's not a terrible thing. I have anxiety, and guess what? I'm a great planner. All right, I'm up all night planning, but and I'm never late. Anxious people are always on time. So it's not such a bad thing, and I'm hoping they're getting help now, and that will lead them to maybe get some help in the future. And trauma is something that happened in the past. We know for high school kids in this country, 2/3 of high school kids say they've experienced trauma, and that's a really hard thing to do. All right, so not all stress is negative. There's some positive stress. We don't want kids to be too stressed out. And this is just a quick slide about trauma. I say I got 6 minutes left. This is freaking me out here. Okay? Trauma doesn't make you stronger. It really doesn't. And just some stuff about anxiety. It's based on fact. It's based on fiction, and it's not based on fact. You know, I always think about this because I love to cook, that my smoke detector goes off on occasion. It's telling you there's a crisis, but there's not a crisis. So it's really important. You know, one of the really good things to do about anxiety with your kids, I did this with my kids and myself, I do it, is to give it a number, 10 being the worst anxiety, 1 being the best. So if your kid talks to you and they're anxious, instead of saying, I am this and that, just give it a number. All right, Mom, I'm a 5 today. All right, that's about middle of the road. Now, the next day they're dealing with something, I'm an 8. And you could say to your child, what would have to happen in your life for you to become a 5 again? It's really a good thing to give it a number because you can't quantify it any other way. And so that's what I did with my clients. I'm not saying clients anymore, and that's what I did with my own kids. Like I say, you're so screwed when your dad's a therapist. I really screwed them up. It's all right. My son's a social worker, so he got me back. And to think about the things you can control and can't control. There's a lot external to your control. A lot external to your control. Okay, so I do want to just quickly talk about suicide because that is one of the leading causes of death for our freshmen. Raise your hand if you've been to Fenway Park. Okay, I hope they're going to be better this year. They suck so far. Okay, imagine you're in Fenway Park and imagine looking to your left and looking to your right, looking at the dugout, look at everyone in that stadium. Now let's add 8,000 people. That's the number of people that die by suicide every year in this country. This is a crisis. Now, on the good side is when we compare kids who are enrolled, matriculating at college, living on campus, to kids same age, not in college, the college kids have lower rates of completed suicide. And I want to tell you why. Most people, I do university work, not a lot, but occasionally, and all the professors say, oh yeah, it must be worse at college. It's not. Having eyes on someone is a highly protective factor. If you're in college, you have a roommate who has eyes on you. In theory, an RA who has eyes on you. Having eyes on someone is a highly protective factor. So that's a good thing. We also know that when we look at completed suicide rates, in Massachusetts 2 years ago, and the Department of Public Health is a couple years behind, people 85 and older have the highest completion rates for suicide, not young people. So there are some good things going, but we want to talk to kids about that. And raise your hand if you're not aware of 988. That's okay if you're not. That's the emergency suicide number. You all know 911 if someone broke into your home. Why do we need 988? I already told you why. 50,000 people die every year in this country. Important to do this. And just very quickly, if you're worried about, I don't want to say anything to my child about suicide, it's not like you're going to plant a seed. Just say, like, if you felt at risk, tell me 3 things you would do. I'd call you, Mom. I would tell my roommate. I'd call my old therapist from middle school. More indicative than, I promise I won't do anything. Like, we want to ask those sort of questions. All right, so here's actually the suicide data from Massachusetts. We're actually we're low, and that's a good thing in terms of completed suicides, and that has to do with gun control. States which have more restrictive gun control laws have lower rates of completed suicide. And of course, your kids are going to spend a lot of time on tech. Just here's a quick slide on what they're doing. All right, I got 3 minutes here. This is trauma, stress, and anxiety all in one. Just quickly, how many of your kids have TikTok? Okay, how many of you have TikTok? You know my next question, or my next statement. You got to get TikTok. Sit down with your kids and say, I'm a moron, tell me about this. TikTok is amazing, except it can be dangerous too. And I put the slide up to show you, It's about mental health struggles for high school girls. They asked about where they get their good information, 67% in real life. But look at the 65% on TikTok. Learn about it. They're spending time doing this app. Unless it's banned, it has to be sold in like a week. I can't remember. It's really important to understand that stuff. All right, so, let's just talk about this. All right, I'm going to go 2 minutes over. Sorry about that. What can you do? When you talk to your child, when they have a problem, and say they come home, my suggestion is you shut off the lights. Why? You don't want to have eye contact. You might remember, or you might know, you have better conversations with kids in the car because no eye contact. Not environmentally sound to be driving around forever. I shut off the lights and have no eye contact and have serious conversations with my kids so we could focus in on the topic. I can tell you, I've done it like literally hundreds of times. It's really effective, especially when you have serious conversations. All right, so I'm going to just talk about self-care now that I have 1 minute left, and I'm going to switch to my last slide. And it's this. Your self-care is really important. By the way, you parents, you suck at self-care. Oh, you're very good. You know what to do, but you suck at it. Be honest, right? You can instruct anyone on what to do. If nothing else, you need to have an emergency joy. This is my emergency joy. Let's take a look at this screen. It's Brigham's chocolate chip ice cream. How many containers do you see in there? How many? How many?
3.
Look closely. There are 4. Why would I have 4? Why would you have 4? Well, first of all, your kid's going off to college. You need an emergency joy. I have it because I'm an anxious person. God forbid the supply chain should abandon me. Like, I'm not going to get caught with less. But it's really important. What? Yes, yes. It's important for you to nurture yourself. And even though you suck at self-care, I'll bet you can have that dark chocolate or that ice cream or whatever to get yourself over that hump. And when your child calls an emergency, before answering, before getting back, say they leave you a message, just take a breath. And when you call back, I'll bet for 50% of your child would say, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is fine. That sort of thing. So I really appreciate being here. It would have been great to have an hour and a half, but I so appreciate half an hour. I'm going to turn it over to the other panelists here.
Awesome. I can jump in. And what a pleasure to follow your presentation, John, because I feel like working with college students in the capacity that I do, which I'll just speak a little bit briefly about so that you know what an additional resource that's out there. But everything down to the ice cream, like I just found myself like nodding my head so much, is so spot on. And just as introduction, I'm Molly Boynton, and I'm the Assistant Director of Student Support at Tufts. And student support is such like a broad like umbrella term, but just a little bit more about the work that we do in student support. I can speak what it looks like at Tufts University, but just know that so many college campuses have the work that we do, and it often is called something like that, student support. Many times it's embedded within student life or student affairs. And what we do is we look to connect with students, hold space, and help them navigate any sort of challenge that may pop up. So that could be anything academic, social, medical, personal, financial, really to be connected with them. Like I said, to sometimes it's just holding space and acknowledging like this is a really challenging time for you, and just giving them some room to talk. And then beyond that, really connecting them with other resources on campus or off campus that could help support them. We work really closely with a lot of the other campus partners, so Residential Life, Counseling and Mental Health Services, the STAR Center, which is academic and accessibility support, the advisors, advising deans, really to be a point on campus that's going to help triage and connect. So for you as parents to know, and then eventually your students to know that so many college campuses are growing this area to help support students, accessing resources and that kind of thing. We really look at ourselves as educators. So we live in a space outside of the clinical space. So I loved John's point about, making sure that you you maybe take some time to look out for the mental health resources on campus, but also check out, what other supports look like, because it can be so overwhelming that there are all these different offices and physical spaces and different resources on a college campus. Is there something like our work in student support that can help your student or even you as a parent navigate all the different places to go? And a lot of times when students are experiencing a challenge, it's going to touch on a lot of, it's going to express itself academically, in the health space, in the social space. So what we can do is really hold all of those pieces to really make sure that students are going to the right places for support. And it's wonderful if they have friends and other, like family that's supportive, but we help talk to students all the time about making sure that they are aware of the experts and the resources there to help support them. Because sometimes what we see is that students who are maybe navigating a significant mental health challenge or a crisis moment, they're going to take that to their friends, and then friends are going to be really impacted, or their community is going to be really impacted by that. How can we help you really go to the right spot? So like I was saying, we help sometimes just hold space. We help refer students to other resources. And then really what we do is we help students make decisions. There are so many decisions to be made. So, we can hold space for very small decisions, but really like just having a thought partner and having someone to talk things through can be helpful. Maybe they're doing that with you as parents or with friends or in a clinical space with their mental health support. Or we really look to just be, again, like help with kind of decision making and just providing that opportunity and that connection to what would things happen if I did this? If I dropped this class, you maybe want to talk to your advisor, or if I am experiencing this social challenge, really anything. So that's what we do in student support. We work with, like I said, lots of different campus partners. John, I love the space that you made to plug the student tuition insurance, because one of the other things that we do in our work, which is present in so many college campuses, anywhere you go, is really we also look to hold conversations around what would it look like if you needed to step away from a semester or more than one semester. Our team and the work that we do, we work directly with students who may be interested in taking time away. And that's exactly what we call it. We don't call it dropping out for a semester. We don't call it anything other than, hey, you are recognizing the opportunity that you have to take time away and really to remove the pressure of, you matriculate right after high school and 8 semesters later, you're done. We really help students kind of think through thoughtfully what they need for their health, what they may need for their financial situation or their family situation or their personal situation to take time away, and really to underscore and validate that you can. And it's a really good thing to do if you need it, and it's okay. There's so much pressure to like keep moving and keep going and be done in 8 semesters. But we love to hold those conversations with students around what would it look like for you and your health if you were to take time away, and to help guide them through that process. And just, to share, it's a lot more straightforward than students think. So we work with so many students every semester who take that opportunity, and we see how important it is for their health. And they may be at a crisis moment when they're making that decision, but then those conversations when they're ready to return and ready to come back, how that foundation that they took and the time that they took to build that foundation is really cool to see how valuable that time can be. We talk to them about partnering with their families around that decision making and other thought partners, but really that's the work that we do. So many different things. I'd be happy to answer more questions if there are questions about kind of what it looks like at Tufts, but also just if I could share anything with you all, it's that there is this resource out there, and we are here to help as educators, help students, be there to grow the skill of help seeking, just like they're going to grow so many other skills socially, academically, many other ways that help seeking is a skill that they're going to learn how to do. Some of them, probably show all sorts of different ways of help seeking now, but really to know that it's something that also gets developed a lot in these next 4, 5, 6 years plus. And the ways that they navigate challenges in their college years can look really similar to how they're going to navigate challenges as a young adult and beyond. So we're here to help teach them how to do that. So yeah, thank you. I'll pass it over to Isabel.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm a senior at Tufts University. I'm 22. And today I'm kind of going to be sharing a bit about the college student perspective of things and what that transition was like from my point of view. And hopefully that'll give you some insight into maybe what your children are feeling right now. And so before I went to college, I was often told something that maybe you've said to your kid or you've heard yourself, which was that college would be the best 4 years of my life. And at the time, I didn't really know what this meant, but I was very excited to experience that. And I was thinking about like what I'd seen in movies and what it would be like when I got there. And so when I started applying to college, that phrase, the best 4 years, began to feel quite heavy on me because best 4 years of your life is a lot of pressure. So I remember thinking, well, how will I know which college is right for me? Which college will give me that experience that everyone seems to have had? And so I did my best during the application process, and I faced some acceptances and some rejections and the limbo of the wait list, and eventually decided to go to Tufts University. And I got to campus ready to start those best 4 years of my life. And just like when I was filling out the application process, I quickly realized that there was a lot of pressure. And I remember my first night in the dorms, was so tired. I'd spent all day moving, and my parents, like you were saying, they definitely stayed on the later side of things. And, I'd spent so much time, I'd move furniture somewhere, and then my mom would say, well, no, the desk is better over here. And then I'd move it back, and we'd go back. We did that with the bed and the dresser. And then, of course, she got her way while she was there. And then when she left, I moved everything. So it took a long time, and I was really tired. All I wanted to do was go to sleep. But I had 3 other roommates. I was living in a quad dorm situation. So we had 2 bedrooms that we would each share with one person and then a common space. And I could hear them in the common area getting ready to go out. And I thought, what am I doing? I need to get up and get ready so I can go out and make friends and have the best 4 years of my life. So I got out of bed and I had my first night out on campus. And as a freshman, a night out is kind of just my roommates and I meeting up with another huge group of freshmen who are probably all roommates with each other, and wandering aimlessly around until you found something to do or a party or whatever was happening. And I remember I was wandering around campus in such a daze and my arms were so sore and I could barely get a sentence out without yawning. And looking back at it, I should have maybe just gone to sleep. But it would take me like a long time from then to realize how to learn how to prioritize my mental health and well-being over this fear of missing out that I was experiencing. And what I found really difficult about college is that every night is kind of like that first night on campus. There's always people making plans to go out, and when you're living in a dorm, you can really hear that all around you all the time. And so it can be a lot of pressure. And if you don't know how to check in with yourself and decide whether or not you have the energy to participate, or if you have too much homework to go out, or if you just don't have the self-confidence to say, maybe I don't want to spend time with that group of people right now, you can end up experiencing burnout very quickly. And I feel like that's what happened to me. So shortly after getting to campus, I began to feel quite unsure of myself, become a little nervous speaking to people. I was meeting so many new people and I was very aware of how I was being perceived. I was worried about coming across the wrong way. And when I spoke to people, my thoughts kind of became very jumbled in my head. And so I began to avoid certain social situations or avoid meeting new people. And as college went on, I felt more and more like I was failing at having this best 4 years of my life experience. And I was struggling to connect with others and take part in new experiences and take advantage of the opportunities around me. And I think what made it harder is I felt very alone in this experience. Like I felt like everyone else was having the best time of their life and making new friends, best friends in a month. And being a student on social media makes that worse, I think. Like a lot of kids are on Instagram posting together. And so you definitely feel the weight of that happening as well. And the more I focused on that feeling of failing, the more stressed I became, which made it even harder to meet new people. So it was kind of this cycle that I had created or that had come to be. And so I've always been a bit on the quieter side, but I would say I am a social person. I love being in crowds and spending time with people and with people watching and kind of just being out and about. But that changed when I went to college, and I became quite self-aware, and it made it difficult to make friends at first, or to feel good about myself, or to pursue the opportunities that were there for me to pursue at my university. And so what I know now is that I was experiencing social anxiety, that I was worried about being observed or judged, and this feeling of self-consciousness or embarrassment was like very, very common. And it even manifests in like physical feelings too. So, like heart beating faster, or like trembling, or shallow breath. And so, but what I've learned now is that it's actually quite common. I was looking up online. Apparently it affects 1 in 10 teenagers and adults in the US. So I wanted to talk about it today with your children later at the high school, because I wanted them to know that they're not alone in this experience, and that recognizing it earlier in your life, and being able to seek out the tools to help manage it, is super important. And it's definitely something that I wish I had learned about myself earlier. So I'm going to recommend later that if people are feeling similar ways, that they have open and honest conversations about it. And maybe it would be helpful to take time now to speak with your children about whether or not they have these feelings, so they can learn to manage them. They can seek those tools to manage them earlier on. And I think I was thinking about the fact that if I had built strong relationships with my parents before I'd gone to high school, I think we've become much closer before I'd gone to college, we've become much closer now. That it would have been easier for me to speak to them. So I think like forming those relationships early on, and similarly forming the relationships with those resources earlier on, it's much easier to find a counselor when you're not in a moment of crisis. And when you're not, and then when you're in a crisis and you're speaking to a stranger about that crisis, it can be less effective, I think, than building those relationships sooner. But that being said, I was able to recognize and work through these feelings while in college, away from my support system at home. So it can definitely be done. And there are a lot of resources available on campus, like you were talking about, mental health resources and also academic support, which can help as well. But what worked for me was finally letting go of the idea that college had to be the best 4 years of my life. And when I was able to let go of this idea, I was able to break that cycle of striving to do things perfectly, and cracking under that pressure, and then beating myself up about the fact that I had cracked under that pressure. And so I could take time to breathe and spend time alone, without feeling bad about myself. And I think almost without noticing, I began to change and grow and become more and more confident. So now I've gained a sense of belonging at Tufts, which I'm like very surprised to hear myself say now. And I wouldn't say that that's come from the college itself, although I've definitely been connected to some great resources there. I would say it hasn't quite come from an external source, but from taking the time to prioritize my health and well-being and build myself up. And so now it's like you can almost find a sense of belonging wherever you go because you feel like worthy of being there. And I think that that's something that everyone deserves to feel and your children deserve to feel. So like having the connections for that is super important. And so later today, I'm going to be speaking in front of a lot of high school students, which if you asked me before I agreed to do this, what the scariest social setting could be, I might say giving a speech to hundreds of high schoolers. And don't get me wrong, I think that mental health is an ongoing process. And I'm reading from a script right now because I was worried that I would feel too nervous and forget what I wanted to say. But I think that a part of mental health is getting to know yourself and the way that you process the world and adapting to that. And so this is my adaptation. And there are always like resources out there and people that help you do this. So connecting to them early on, I think is super important and great to do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Altman, and I am a mental health author, advocate, and speaker. I started a small business called Bake It Till You Make It, which uses food and baking to talk about mental health in a way that is authentic and vulnerable, but also fun. And in the last 3 years, I got married, made a documentary, and spoke at the White House, all while having significant mental health challenges. So all to say that if your child is struggling in this area, they will have a very full life, as I think I have so far in my 32 years. So my story really takes place about an hour down the road in Southborough. And growing up in Southborough brought an endless amount of privilege. Every extracurricular activity I could imagine, teachers who really cared about their students, who had the resources to support them, and everything really felt at my fingertips. And I think because of that, I felt so much pressure to be perfect. But for me, it wasn't just about perfection. It was really about the sense of not feeling enough, not feeling good enough, smart enough, thin enough, kind of fill in the blank. And because I didn't really have the words to share that with anybody, I looked to my external supports and resources to really tell me that I was enough. So I was a musical theater kid. So anytime I got a main role in a show, I felt enough. Anytime I did well on a test or a paper, then I felt enough. But kind of the hardest place I didn't feel enough was at home. I'm so nervous right now. I don't know why. I'm just gonna say it out. Yeah. I think it's hard to talk to parents. I think it's so important to talk to parents. I think my parents really could have used that. So I think that is where the nerves are coming from. Anyway, in terms of my enoughness, my mom has had an eating disorder my entire life. So walking through the world and never seeing her as enough or herself as enough, I always kind of felt that that would follow suit for me. And while I think I struggled with my mental health for many, many years, I didn't really know that until I got to college. This was my first time away from home without my supports, and I just had this endless amount of anxiety. I did an early action program, which really helped me. I made amazing friends, like right off the bat, which really helped me when I had my first ever panic attack during my first college class. And I had never been to therapy before. I saw it on TV and in movies. I remember my favorite movie, Freaky Friday. There was a therapist in that movie that asked, like, how do you feel about that? So I was able to seek out resources and was quickly diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which I would later learn was OCD, major depression, and an eating disorder myself. And I was able to kind of go through that first year of college in therapy, taking medication. I know going on medication is a very personal decision. But for me, kind of like what John was saying, it took my anxiety from like a 10 to a 6. We used a lot of numbers in my family too. And the idea that I could go to a 6 and participate in my life was really huge for me. But the summer in between my freshman year and my sophomore year, it was recommended to me that I get more help, specifically for my eating disorder. So I went to a program where I would go every day just to relearn coping skills. Well, I guess learn for the first time, coping skills and mechanisms to work through my eating disorder. But unfortunately, that really made my depression worse because I was in this program and I didn't see myself getting better. So unfortunately, that really triggered a lot of depression and feelings of hopelessness and suicidal ideation. And during my second semester of my sophomore year, I ended up taking a medical leave, which was the best decision I could have made. And I spent a lot of time down the road at McLean Hospital, and getting kind of the tools and resources and building a support system. My therapist at McLean has now been my therapist for the last 13 years, and she has helped support me in every single way and capacity. So much so that at the end of my time at McLean, I decided to transfer to Northeastern University. And going to Northeastern absolutely fit like a glove. I think there were a lot of reasons why it was a much better fit for me than my original school. But I think probably the biggest is that I was ready for college. I had the tools. I knew how to ask for help. I knew how to connect with people, and I had an incredible experience in college, something I never thought I would have when I was in my freshman year, first class, having a panic attack. Not to say that things have gotten to, like, everything's great now, and like I've continued to just go up. Healing and progress are not linear, but I am really proud to say that I graduated from college after having that really difficult experience. Some things I wish my parents knew were there are resources, there is support. I know we've spent a lot of time talking about what that is today. That's really amazing. I also wish my parents recognized that you can't always see what's going on inside. Always having this like big bubbly personality. I've been this way since I was like 2 or 3 years old. I think there was always this sense of like, Dana's not depressed, or like Dana doesn't have OCD. Those are just quirky things that she does, or she doesn't have an eating disorder. Like she doesn't look like who we might think does. So really having them honor my experience and hear me, I think would have been really helpful, and something that I hope you're all empowered to do. And I'm also looking forward to speaking to your students later and talking about how it is possible to live a really full life with mental health challenges. So thank you so much. I think we're all going to take questions now.
That's awesome.
Mental health concern. Is it acute only care that they get at college? And then they should seek support within that state. And I'm just wondering if you know any of the details about how that works, if the student is going far enough away from their primary care, or they don't have a position in place that they need.
I can speak to what it looks like at Tufts, and then maybe others have other feedback too. But for example, like students who are coming from out of state, right, that it can be a consideration is that like the licensure for your clinicians that you're working with, like if they're licensed in that state, then you can continue to see them, but not so if they don't hold the license. But at Tufts, the Counseling and Mental Health Center, as will, I imagine, many other institutions, counseling and mental health services, will work with you then to ideally set you up with resources in the area. There are some awesome resources that you can even do that work ahead of time. You don't have to wait until your student matriculates and gets there. You can learn about what that looks like. And there are 2 wonderful resources. Like that's why I loved John's advice to like reach out to the counseling and mental health services, or at least look them up and see what it looks like. But to say the least, at Tufts, we have a role called the care manager. She's a clinician herself, but her role is really to work with the student to help them find the right fit for care within the community. So that's everything from insurance to other preferences around approach, other like pieces of, what would be important for the student in that work, parts of their identity, anything like that. So that is offered to the students at Tufts. But you're right that kind of ideally, like the work at the center is more kind of like meant to be short term and then longer term care out in the community. Psychology Today and Thriving Campus are 2 resources. Thriving Campus specifically is really targeted towards finding providers that have a focus in young adults and the college student mental health population. So check out those 2. But that's what I would add.
Yeah,
kind of
that's great advice. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the website where your child's going, but you probably haven't spent a lot of time looking at these sort of things. So you need to do that. It's a really good point about licensure. During COVID, everything was relaxed. Everyone could be online, but make sure that that clinician, or find out if that clinician can see someone online, is really important. And just remember, your kids don't like to disappoint you, and they're probably going to undershare about their mental health often. So you are, I see all moms here so far. Your moms, you know your kid. You've had your child at home for 17 years. If something is telling you something is wrong, it could be wrong. So let's remember they don't like to disappoint us. And don't be afraid to say, are you all right? You don't sound like yourself. Are you, a simple thing to say is, are you happy? Have them answer those sort of questions. It's not going to ignite anything, but I think it's good advice. Parents really need to shift their focus now that they've, if your kids have gotten into college, it's like, what is a college offering, and that sort of thing.
And one other piece I would add to that too is doing that work with your student, with your kid, because that's part of their learning experience is how do I help seek when I need this? So you could even kind of go through it together in these next couple of months before they go, but then eventually that work is going to be their work to do, get connected to resources, navigate the mental health care system or other systems around help seeking. That's what we like to bring it back to like student support. We do that work all the time with students, but like, how do we make that connection with students who need it? But I hope that helps in what it kind of looks like. Yeah.
I have a timing question. Would you reach out to colleges prior to being accepted to them, or does that type of information go back and then become part of the decision-making process at the school?
Definitely not. So you can do as much. I would encourage you to reach out and learn about resources for any school. And it is not connected to admission decisions. So a lot of the, really the mental health pieces are confidential and stay confidential, stay private. We in student support, we get parent, I forgot to mention that part of our work is really to the way we get I told you that we connect with students who are navigating challenges, but how do we get to know who they are? Sometimes they know about us and reach out on their own. A lot of times we're connecting to students through those campus partners, like their advisors or the health services academic center will share with us, hey, this student could use an outreach. Sometimes it's our friends or professors. We have a place where anyone in the community can fill out like a student of concern report of, hey, this student may use a check-in, could benefit from a check-in. But we hear from parents, and parents can always reach out to us and share, hey, I'm just kind of wondering about this for my student. It's a really great place for parents to kind of share their concerns. We are limited in what we could share. We can't be like, oh, I met with your student yesterday. They're, doing great. Or like, oh, you better check in on them. But we hope to be a place where parents can feel comfortable to ask questions, to learn about what resources are available at the school, to take in kind of and ask questions. But it should not influence admission decisions.
Now, we've all heard about helicopter parenting. This is not helicopter parenting. This is good parenting, finding out what's going on campus.
That's a great reminder.
My question's for the girls. So each of you had mentioned that you wish your parents were more supportive or understood maybe some of the challenges that you were feeling. So as a parent of a junior, so we're still really starting the process. I have a daughter that maybe doesn't communicate maybe the challenges that we all know our kids are going through. There's social media challenges, there's school, and when you know that your child, is going through that, how do you, as your teenage self, think your parents could have improved you opening up more? Because we can all say, do you want to talk about anything? Is anything bothering you at school? Sometimes you can say we can talk to somebody. They may or may not want to, or they may say it's not helpful to them. But how would you suggest parents trying to get their kid to open up to the challenges that they're feeling already before going to college, like junior year, senior year? There's anxiety, there's a little bit of excitement, but there's a lot of anxiety. And I think a lot of parents here, we've done a lot for our kids. So I grew up where my parents didn't even talk about college. I just had to figure it out for myself. And I think, maybe I was more adjusted because I didn't rely on them. But our kids, I think, rely on us because we've done a lot for them. It's a big step. So what would you say as your, high school self as suggestions to parents? What can we do?
I think when you were talking, first of all, I think this is a great question, and I appreciate you thinking about it already. I remember my parents asked me if I wanted to see a therapist, and I was like, oh, I don't know. They're like, and then when I basically said no, they're like, thank God. I'm so glad you didn't. So I think like modeling that, like, it's okay to talk about mental health, like whether maybe not speaking to your own personal experience, but like something in the community. I think that would have been really helpful for me to know that it was okay to ask for help, because I think it was said, but then it wasn't. I didn't see it unfolding. So I wish I had that.
I agree. I think for me, if you felt comfortable enough, I think sharing stories about your own personal mental health with your children can be really helpful, so that you feel like it's okay to experience that, and also that more than that is that your parents could understand. I think somehow sometimes when you're younger, it's like, oh, they've never been where I am, but and then to hear your parents say that they've experienced these things that you felt, it can really shift how you think about your parents, and make that shift from thinking about them when you're a high schooler as your caretaker, and starting to think about what they've experienced. And I think that that's really strengthened my relationship with my parents. And I also think that what's really important is the gradual building of a relationship over time. And I think sometimes my mom could come in at times really well-meaning with wanting to have an open conversation, but if we hadn't prepped that for a couple months, if that hadn't been what the dynamic was before that conversation, it can be hard to have. So I think building long-term openness is super important, and good to start. That's why I was very excited to talk about to parents of juniors, because it's good to start now instead of when they've already left for college.
I think the kids would really get a lot from listening to the two of you at school, because it's coming from someone their own age, and I think a lot of them probably feel it already, but it's nice to know that it's normal right now.
Right.
And I would add to that too. I was grateful to see those statistics that you shared, John, that are alarming because of the incidence and the higher rates of mental health. But I think a really helpful thing for parents to do is validate and normalize around this can be very much a part of the college experience, the high school experience, or just the growing up experience is mental health challenges. So it's acknowledging that, and that's what in working with all sorts of different challenges that students are navigating, even though there's many different kinds, having a challenge is to be expected. There will be hard times. So normalizing that and validating that.
Thank you for very informative sessions. I think it's much needed, particularly for me as an immigrant.
Yes.
I just don't have the tools to know what to say when my children needed help or support. I think one thing that I was wondering about is if there's a formalized or some type of parent training or tools to kind of give us the word, give us the sentences, when the children do certain things, how do we respond to them? Is there any type of resources that we can utilize?
It probably come back to your question as
Well, again, I think a lot of us trying to communicate with our kids, and again, we come from a different generation. They're dealing with things we didn't deal with.
Right.
We didn't have to deal with social media. I mean, it's very high on academics. There's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of TikTok, and you're looking at things that aren't really real. So they're comparing themselves with all this, and like you said, being self-conscious all the time. I don't know, we do our best to open the conversation with our kids. A lot of times they'll just say, I'm fine. Or I don't want to, there's nothing going on. So I don't know. It's no one ever gave us the rules.
Yeah, of course.
Try our best, right? Exactly. And a lot of times there's an incompetency feelings, as parents, right? You tell, you want your parents to be better, but I think a lot of times I feel very vulnerable to. I wanted to help them, but I just don't know how.
So let's talk about that. That's a great way to start. To say, I want to help you, but I can't. Or if you said something that wasn't quite, on target, say, look, my intention was to help you. But they don't judge you by your intentions. They judge you by your actions.
Yeah,
And that's the problem.
Mhm.
So explain their intention and say, if I had to do it again, this is what I would do. And there are a couple of phrases that come to mind. When your child is talking about what's going on, their challenges, just say, tell me more. We want them to talk. It's much more important what they say than what we say. We want to understand how it is they do that. We also want to say something like, you've talked about so much, you have so much on your plate. How do you handle what you are handling? Because even a student who's struggling, and most students are handling something really well, how do you do that? Well, Mom, I'm organized on this and that, and that's really good. We want to accentuate the positive, and we want to understand it goes like this and like that. They fall in love on Monday, things are great. By Tuesday, they never want to talk to that person again. Things are awful, and they don't want to go to class. It's really up and down. And part of our job is to not go on that slope with them, is to maintain an even keel and not to put it in their face like, oh, by Thursday, you'll feel better. Just know in your heart that things will get better. You put in 17 good years of love and time and attention for your child, and having a little confidence that things will level out. Not in that week, maybe not in that month, but over time, maybe by junior year, that happens. And it's managing our own emotions.
And I was going to add that there.
Just to jump in, we had our sophomore workshops in the first semester, end of first semester, middle and beginning of the second semester. And we do a section for your sophomores when they were sophomores on coping mechanisms. And we start off the conversation by saying, first, you know yourself best, but you don't think you know yourself best. But so checking in with yourself, that's what you guys were talking about, and that you also know your children best, right? So really, and hopefully you know yourself too. So if you're not somebody that leans in, is as comfortable with emotions initially, I think giving yourself that grace, that self-care is important. And then offering, again, that space to not fix, I think is really important. And the other thing that I think has been really helpful with working with your teenagers that I've been sort of experimenting a little bit more when they come to us in guidance, because they do find us in guidance, is what do you need more of and what do you need less of in this moment, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to jump in, like I can solve that problem for you with your teacher right now. Like I can help you and help you advocate, but let's partner together in this process. Like you're nervous, I'm a little nervous. So I think acknowledging it, still being your confident selves as parents, even if we're feeling a little bit insecure. But I think really, I like that tangible piece of like, what do we need more of and what do we need less of? Physically, do I need a snack right now? Right? Like, can we go get a Diet Coke? That's what I remember my freshman year in college, being like, Mom, can you bring me Diet Pepsi, please? Right? and it was really, I needed something more, right? But it was easy to start the conversation that way.
One other piece I just wanted to add for your question was that institutionally, where your student lands may have a, like for example, Tufts University has a parent liaison or a parent support point person, which can hold a lot of that, like a really good question. So other universities often will have that, which could be a great place to ask questions around, is there a parent support group? Is there a network or a community? Just as we would encourage students to find community and find support, so important for parents too. So that's a really good question.
Thank you so much. I just had a little kind of to tie a couple things together. One of the things I loved when you're speaking about your experience at Tufts is as a student, and you were reflecting on, this need for perfection and, feeling like you weren't doing everything that you could. I feel like I'm hearing the same thing from all of us as parents as well. I feel like we all are trying to do the best thing that we can do as parents and don't always know the answers. And sometimes I find for myself, it's really helpful to model that with my children and have that as an actual conversation and say, I actually don't know how to handle this right now. I haven't been here. Can you help me? Like, help me think about what you're thinking and what you're experiencing and what you're going through. And then I'll say, I might be overreacting here. I kind of give myself that space for imperfection. And then that in turn kind of models it for my kids so that they understand that it's okay to not know the answer. And and want to fix it, but not know where to go with it, and just kind of keep that conversation. And I get emotional with my kids, and I'll say, I'm sorry, I know I'm going to get emotional right now. I'm feeling really emotional. So if it bothers you, one of my daughters out of the two doesn't like when my tone of voice changes. It triggers her. So, and it's great because she's told me that, and then I say, okay. And so I know I changed my tone of voice, and I don't mean that to be, but it helps me check in, and we're just kind of checking in together through all of it, because it's hard to gauge yourself in the moment, and it teaches the kids a good lesson to understand that this is how you go through life. Is you don't know what to expect and how to deal at every moment. So.
Can I just share? So I'm a mom of five. My daughter's here now in her second year of college at Queen's University. She's worked very closely with Amber and Sierra. She's been on the IEP since third grade. So the fact that she's been able to successfully go to college, she's in her second year and she's doing amazing. I'm so proud of her. But her first year was it was a tough year for her. There was a huge transition, and I know for sure I didn't take advantage of a lot of the support. Like it was stated earlier, I was the first person in my family to attend college. So my mom, she never really knew like how to support me in that way. But for Sierra, she was doing really great her first year. Then all of a sudden it took just kind of like a turn. And I remember her being home, and I can just see it on her face. I was just looking at her, and I was like, are you okay? Never really seen this girl cry. She's very strong, being the oldest of 5 children. And she just stood up and she broke down. And for me, because she doesn't really cry, she's not really an emotional person, I knew right then and there, like, okay, Sharita, like, you have to, like, really figure out what's going on. And so before I could even say anything, I just hugged her. And her dad, he was in the room, and we just embraced her. And, she cried, I cried. And actually, that actually made her feel a little better to open up. She was just having, like, a really tough time with one of her classes. She didn't want to get it wrong. And her thing was she was afraid to fail this class. That's it. She just didn't want to get a bad grade and fail. And financially, she knows that's a struggle for us. And she's like, I don't want, you to have to struggle to try to figure it out how to do this class. And so she had that on her shoulder. And I just said, Sierra, it's okay. If you fail this class, then you just repeat it. Like, don't put that much pressure. I know you said not to tell them when they start the first year or something like that. Like, if you fail, it's okay. It's okay. Like, just breathe. We hugged and embraced. And I tell you, this year has been such a game changer. She just recently was a part of Simmons. They do this big women's conference that they just did, and she was so hands-on with it in the background, helping to support doing the interviews. And I've just seen her in a way I've never seen her before. And so it gets better. I think as the year goes on, obviously. Just wanted to share that.
I love that story as you hold your other little one on your lap. I was like, oh.
I was just glad this wasn't your college
Yeah.
Kind of a logistical question. So once our kids turn 18, I know there's only so much the college can share with us. So what can you share, and what would be the process or the documentation required for you to share more?
Yeah. I can start and take that because we get that question a lot from students and from parents. So FERPA does not allow from the university perspective to share information about your student, specifically record, health, any of these things without your student's permission. So with that being said, I partner with parents. Anytime a student is like, is it okay if my mom joins our meeting? Of course. So really having partnering with your student, it's kind of the easiest way to be a part of that conversation. However, if that is outside of that, we can always share offices about the work that we do, about how we would approach situations. So sometimes parents call into us and they're like, wow, my student is really struggling with their roommate. I'm worried about this, this, and this. We could talk about, hey, in this situation, this is how we would guide and kind of give answer in a hypothetical instead of being well, you're a student and this is what the steps that we're taking. So that can be helpful at first for parents just to have the kind of knowledge of what it would look like in a certain situation. And that's a way to kind of answer the questions that they have. But it is true. There are, if you're joining your student or your child in meetings, that's a way to navigate through that. And then I will add, it's really kind of approaching it through empowering your child and empowering your student, that this is their, you are there to kind of guide with them, but they are building the skills. And that's a big adjustment for them and for you. But I hope that helps answer what that looks like. In terms of what permissions would be needed, that can look different for every office, whether it's health services or counseling and mental health. That's going to be a different process than the registrar or the academic center. Every office will likely have some sort of process or policy. So I don't want to give an answer that could be different per institution or office. But for the work that we do, we often are your parent is welcome to join us. But students could say no. And that's okay.
I would just add one thing. We know that if your child is not achieving academically, socially, or if they're athletes athletically, there's a reason for it, and the reason likely is anxiety. Remember, anxiety is closely related to depression. So that should be the first thing to think about. If you're an anxious parent, you've passed along great things to your child and maybe some of your anxiety. That would be me, right? So don't beat yourself up about it. But I'd be thinking if they're not achieving. And remember, if you ever look at the surveys at the high school level, and the same true for college, the number one stressor is academics in high school, and it's true in college. And of course, their mental health trails that very closely. So think about anxiety and ask yourselves, is it they won't do something, like they're lazy, they won't do, or they can't, they don't have the capacity? When we have anxiety, when we have depression, we lose capacity. The best athlete is not a good athlete. The best student is not a good student. Remember, anxiety is like a learning disability too. They're not hearing as well, they're not thinking as well, they're not writing as well, they're not processing as well. So that would be one of the first things I'd be thinking about sending my child off to college. Is it anxiety as kind of the number one thing? Because it's the number one mental health diagnosed disorder in this country.
I just had something I wanted to add to what you said about Bertha. I have an older daughter who's a sophomore in college. And it didn't occur to me, I don't know why, that I would not be able to make appointments for her with medical professionals once she turned 18. So she recently had a new neuropsych, and they recommended a whole bunch of stuff, which she really wants to do. But now she has to make all those appointments and reach out to potential providers herself.
Through the university system or through the healthcare system?
Through a private healthcare system. And I was fortunate that she is in college close by, so I was able to go out and sit in her dorm with her while she made the calls. So anything she needed to ask about, she could. But I wish I had known that before she went, so that I could have started training her to make those calls as a high schooler on her own behalf, so that she had that skill before she went away.
Yeah. And I love that you use the word, it's a skill. It's something to learn. And the systems can be complex, making appointments to insurance. These are things we help students with, but oh my gosh, communications. Yes. But that's a great point.
So first have them order dinner. Just ordering dinner this weekend. And then they can start practicing managing their medications if they have any, maybe their laundry.
Do you notice, has she grown in that area? Has she then been able to make future appointments independently?
So yes, she has. But it was only yesterday that I went and sat in her room while she made the appointments. So I think now at least she knows what types of questions they'll ask. We're still in a situation where she has a list of 20 potential providers, and she has to decide which one to call. So it is it's a tough process.
Can you set up a process? I know I set it up for my mom, but who I can just speak on her behalf without her doing anything.
It's a question worth asking. I think it would probably depend on institution and service and that kind of thing, but that's a question worth asking. But you're right, it is a skill. And if you help them do it that way, then they're learning that skill for when they need to do it down the line.
Yeah, it just made me think, well, I also have a junior in the high school. I need to start getting her to make some of those phone calls now before she has to, so that she's all set once she goes away.
Yeah.
I thought there was a form or something.
There is a form.
Is there a form that you can
I've
get
signed
permission while your child is 18 and in college or whatever that you can, make appointments on their behalf?
Personally, my mom, before I went to college, she was like, well, if you want to make all your appointments, you're welcome to. But if you still want me to help you, you can sign this form and it will release medical records to, or she'll be able to call and give input or, call my doctor and ask how she was very respectful of boundaries. And I think that that's also really important. But I did not want to be making all those appointments, so I happily signed the form, and I'm grateful for the help. So it's an option.
Is that through your doctor's office, through?
I believe it's independent of any university. I think it's a medical form, and I don't know what it's called, so I'm sorry, but I know I have signed it, and I think.
If the research shows that the brains are not fully developed until 25, and they're under our insurance until 26.
That's right.
Why they have to make their own.
Yeah. And students often have questions around what will be I'm on my parents' insurance. What will they see? What are my rights around privacy? Which are good questions.
Yes, it was definitely, as an 18-year-old, I still had to agree to it, and it's definitely a conversation to be had, which was it was worth talking about it, I think.
I like how Amber talked about though, the first have them call for ordering for dinner and that sort of thing. Because I think there's some things that, my daughter's very, very good at so many different things, and I am always amazed at her multitasking and her academics and different things she's involved in. But then there are little things that occur to me that when we talk about these are skills that we need to learn. And, she had an eye appointment, an eye doctor appointment, and I was like, well, I can't find parking. I'm just going to drop you off here. Go ahead and check in. The look of panic. And we've been in this office 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. This should be good. But it is funny, things that we've become accustomed to as adults that we're doing on so many levels with our kids every day. These are all brand new things for them. And so I all of a sudden took a step myself, and I was like, oh, I need to have her do these things more often. So now the next dental appointment, I didn't go in. I was like, you go in, check yourself in. It's we have to kind of stop and think about those things too. And it's sometimes checking ourselves.
And it's okay that they learn.
So that I'm there, but I'm like.
But they do it. They show up, right? They will show up, right? So we have about a couple minutes because we will transition over to the student program. So we'll need our Isabel and Dana to come on over with us. But so any final questions that we have them here to pick their brains?
Can I just say those mama bear forms that we were just referencing are important in case your child gets hurt and you're not there, because then the parent is able to get medical information.
Yes.
So aside from mental health, because you probably won't be included in the confidential part, but really it's important to, if God forbid they get hit by a car or hurt in any way, so that you can get any information. And once they're older than 18, it's not a privilege. Or it's not a right. So.
But we will reach out to emergency contacts. You're right. That's a really good point about you will hear. Yes.
Yeah. Educational, health. You need to make sure those forms when your child is 18 that they're signed and notarized. What are these forms for? So Mama Bear has them, but you can also just Google them. It's like $75 online. Or just Google them and you just do blah blah, fill in the information.
What is the form called?
Well, so there are a few different ones. One is to get health information if they get hurt, to be called if your child is incapacitated. And then there's if you look up Mama Bear, then you'll see
that's the insight.
I'll say too. I'll add to that if we follow up with any student who has had any visit to the hospital or things like that, and if they are not able to communicate or if their emergency contact needs to be reached, you do not need a form. If you are listed as the emergency contact, we will reach out. You do not need an extra form. So, you know, sometimes that's why just have those emergency contacts be updated. It is up to your student about who is listed as that emergency contact. But if it's you, then yes, you will hear if in case of an emergency without a form.
But I will say, like, when you actually pick the school they're going to go to, there is all these forms that they can sign. They don't think about all these forms all the time. So I sat down there and was like, this is what this gives me access to. Do you agree? Mm-hmm. And then, like, fill it out and turn it. And they would never turn it in. Like, just sit down and say, this is what it means. Are you okay? It's okay if you say no, but like, at least you know where the form is and that you can fill it out.
Yeah. And sometimes those forms need to be filled out each year, which is good because, like, you know, first year you go through it together. Second year you go together.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you talk them through it. But they wouldn't normally take that necessarily upon themselves or even think about it because they're more right.
Yeah, like I don't. Yeah.
That's okay.
So many things.
Senior. We'll take one final thought.
I just want to thank the two students and speaking about your resilience because I think that is going to be the most impactful thing for these kids to hear today is that genuine story of your own story and giving of your authentic selves. And I know it was really hard to do that with us today as parents at a different level, in a different way. And I just really value that and appreciate it. And I know the students are going to get a lot out of it from you. So thanks for being so great.
Thank you.